The views and opinions expressed in the Golden Boot podcast are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Golden Boot podcast as a whole.
Y'all ready to get rolling? Quiet on the set. Hey, welcome back. It's another episode of HBCU. I wish your boy Pooh Bell. Got my man Ant Petty Murphy in the building. What's good with you, my boy?
You could have kept that playing for a few more minutes, though, my boy.
Listen, I found another song I'm gonna play.
Changing the intro up.
Nah, I might not change. I can't. I want to change the intro, but I can't. It give me two. You know what I'm saying? That 400 degrees.
They do something to me every time.
But I found one. And I was like, because I heard it one night, and I was like, oh, I was on TikTok. I was like, oh
yeah.
What is this? What is this you say?
You're gonna have to send me that.
I'm gonna send. Matter of fact, I'm gonna send it as soon as we get off of here. Remind me, because you know I got bad memory. I got bad memory sometimes. But man, I hope everybody's doing well tonight, man. Thank everybody for tuning in. You know what it is. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. We got football to talk about, man. Like real football. Like game.
Like live game action.
Has been played. And we ain't even got to type hypotheticals no more.
Right. We could talk about actualities.
Yes, sir. Man, hey, I do want to shout out, man, our good peoples, man, up in the VA, well, from the VA area. The HU Fireship, man, went on there Saturday, talked the Hampton Grambling game. I think you would have been proud of me, man. I ain't even call him Hoochie Hugh. I ain't talking about them tights. I'm still mad at him, man. 2 years in a row, he done ran off on us. Like we owe him, like he owe us money. You know what I'm saying? He took off. But man, I ain't talking about them. I actually took up for Hugh, man. I you know what I'm saying? I think he get a bad rap. So
okay.
He get a bad rap, man. Because everybody
Let me find out I'm rubbing off on you a little bit.
Yeah, man. So I talk good about Grambling when you ain't here. But when you here, I'll let you do all that.
You can't give me the satisfaction, huh?
Nope.
I feel it.
Man. But man, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm looking forward to it. We gotta talk this SWAC MEAC challenge. And yeah, I did SWAC MEAC challenge because they earned that right Saturday. Yeah. What's good, Marv? Marv in the building.
Josh in the building.
Josh. What's good, Josh? Yeah, we gotta do that. We'll do that. We're gonna, we gotta get to our sponsors, but first, man, tomorrow's a special day, man. It is.
Happy birthday, man. That's all you wanted me to say.
That's what you me?
Happy birthday.
Me? Oh man.
Let's go get that out the way now.
I appreciate it, man.
Go ahead, have appreciate it. You was just gonna keep bringing
everybody in the chats, man. Appreciate it. Hey, y'all go ahead and drop $1 for your boy in, you know what I'm saying, super chats. Or more. What we gonna do? We're gonna take that money. We're going to the SEC SEC. SWAC. We're going to the SWAC championship.
Your boy in here.
Trav. Hey, Trav, I gotta holler at you, man. I'm trying to get down there Saturday. You gotta let me know something. I'm gonna be down there Saturday. With my folding chair too, Trav. I'll be there. I'm ready. Got my folding chair.
Ready to tailgate, huh?
Yeah, and I'm bringing the camera. So appreciate it. But man, let's go ahead and get into it. We got a special guest, man. We got our homie in the building. We got the big homie.
Superstar.
Yeah, man. You know, he's I forgot the name. I'm gonna have to ask him about it. We came up with a name for him and Mo if there was a singing duo. I forgot the name. I think it was like Black the Men or something like that. It was so crazy. Oh man. But yeah, man, we're looking forward to it, man. Been waiting on this. Y'all know I ain't got no sense, man. I left all my sense. I don't know why I left them. If I knew, I would have went back and got them. So anyway, man, let's go ahead and get this thing started, man. Gotta give a shout out to our sponsor over at BetOnline. BetOnline.ag. We'll be back in 1 minute. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your sports information, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds, lines, and player injury reports for this year's NBA and NHL playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters. This season, we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. We have everything from NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL to golf, tennis, UFC, and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games that you can play right from your home. Head on over to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use the promo code BLEAV to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Told y'all we got the big homie in the building. I had to change up his graphic and everything. Jamie, Al B. Score Walker. Man, welcome back, Jamie. Man, how you been, man? It's good to see you again.
Man, I am wonderful, sirs. Wonderful. I'm looking at that old cut, though, man. I had some hair trickling around. We was just talking about haircuts in the pre-show.
Yeah.
And look, man, I cut my own hair, make sure it's all shined and buffed up and, all that good stuff, man. But it's too expensive out in these streets, man, for a haircut.
Yeah,
so,
man,
got to do it all myself. But, that picture,
inflation
man.
Real.
Yeah, man, I needed a good shave. But, man, I got a story to tell real quick. I told everybody. Man, look, I know Ant talking about, letting it go. But, look, man, doing it yourself, I get it. But, man, make sure the razor isn't too sharp. I took a whole patch out my head a couple of weeks ago, bleeding like a stuffed pig, cutting my hair, man. So look, be careful, man. Talking about doing it yourself, be careful.
Yeah,
So
I might go ahead and keep paying somebody for that.
So, speaking of that, so y'all, it might be hard to believe. I had a bald head at one time. I cut my hair bald.
Yeah, it's called boot camp.
No, that was skin. No, this was bald, like soft baby booty bald. Saying about 8 years ago. My wife, saying she was like, I would love to see you with a bald head. So, all right, so I surprised her one day, cut bald. She was like, oh, it looks good. I was like, okay, thank you. And I kept it for a while. I came home one day. I said, yeah, the lady at work said, I look good with a bald head. She's like, I think you should grow your hair back out. Okay. All right. Gotcha.
That boy ain't got a haircut since.
No.
Man, I would anyway. Wish somebody would get Clippers close. But man, we got football to talk about, man. We got football to talk about. MEAC SWAC challenge, or shall we say SWAC MEAC challenge?
Oh no, it's SWAC MEAC challenge this year, Holmes.
Yeah.
SWAC.
Back-to-back years that the SWAC is at least one, SWAC MEAC challenge. I'll be the first to say it. I didn't think that Jackson State fell off, but I did think there was going to be some hurdles. It didn't look like they skipped a beat.
It does not, man. This is what I told somebody. Even when the transition of Coach Sanders moving on to Colorado and the transition into TC Taylor coming in, number one, I kind of predicted that would happen anyway, because I think when you're talking about someone who loves that university the way TC Taylor does, who was successful as a player in that system, loves the culture, loves the people, and understands exactly what Jackson State is, despite his own moves within that last regime. Him, somewhat being demoted from offensive coordinator, going back to, more of a position coach and things of that nature. Despite all of that, he is the number one, or was the number one person that I thought would understand that culture, regardless of, them stepping outside and maybe going to get another celebrity hire, or there were rumors that Ed Reed was out there. I know, a couple of people have debunked those. But at the same time, I thought he was the perfect person for that job. And the reason being is because of what he brings from a knowledge standpoint, being a coach in the MEAC at one point, position coach, offensive coordinator at North Carolina Central. He knows that culture, along with playing in the SWAC. He was the perfect person to take over that position because of the love he has for the university. And I thought if he could get maybe the recruiting prowess, just a little bit of it that was captured in the last regime, I think he would. I thought he would be all right anyway. Now, to say he was going to recruit the same kind of talent, right now, it's looking like overall, if you go from top to bottom, I think right now it's definitely comparable. Now, not to say it's the last team. You're talking about you gather the 5-star, lots of 4 stars, things of that nature. But when you're talking about recruiting in general and how they do the kind of rankings when it comes to players, I think that overall in the recruiting, the tandem and the amount of kids he was able to get, both in the transfer portal and just recruiting in general, I think he did really well. He has a lot of talent across the board. And so this team wasn't going to fall off but so much, because I think when you're talking about recruiting pipelines, yes, you got the popularity going on with Deion Sanders, but along with that, you're the hot name. So I think people still want to come to that university. And I think as long as they continue to step outside of what people think Jackson State is, and what I'm talking about is just the entire surroundings. When you're talking about Jackson, Mississippi, things of that, things going on in the surrounding areas. If you concentrate on just school and what that tradition is, I think they can still continue to recruit at a high level. And I think TC Taylor has people in place that can continue making that university great, making that football team great.
If I heard correctly, I think TC Taylor as an assistant and now as a head coach going against Coach Buddy Pugh is now 4-0.
Absolutely. He is. And what's crazy about it is, him, and another, JSU, great in Jerry Mack at North Carolina Central. He knows that MEAC conference. So I think he understood going into this game exactly what it was going to take. Now, South Carolina State did themselves no favors at all, because as quiet as I thought they were over the offseason, I thought it was just a result of them, just being patient, going with their process. And they did recruit a lot of good young players. You saw some of that in the game. But that team is by no means complete, having a new offensive coordinator and new defensive coordinator. They just didn't look good and have not gelled yet. And even if we're talking about what their schedule is coming up, I'm not finding a win in the next 3 to 4 weeks, to be totally honest with you, for South Carolina State. But it's nothing new with them. They came into the season in the Celebration Bowl when they came into conference 5 and finished that season. I want to say 5-6, going into winning the MEAC. So it was a thing of, they don't mind playing the big boys. They don't mind playing, FBS teams and really high FCS caliber squads as well. They don't mind making, playing those kind of squads. So when they do go in a conference, they'll be, what they think is better prepared. So we'll see if they're able to do that going into this year. But right now, the continuity between offensive coordinator, quarterback, just the talent around it, and that defense that looked out of sync. And trust me, their defensive coordinator, Thomas Howard, was somebody that was a D coordinator at North Carolina A&T, who was successful for years. And so when you're talking about just how they looked, it wasn't his finest hour. It wasn't that team's finest hour at all.
Yeah. You got another Ag in the building. Oh, Dave.
Dave,
I gotta holler at you too about
man. Dave we was all in the building. Didn't get to see
Yeah.
Dave. You know what I'm saying? So, man, we got to get up, Dave. We have got to get up in one of these moments, man.
Yeah, I gotta get with Dave. Dave, we gotta get it with you on PNP, talk some PNP this season too, with the you know what I'm saying, Saints and stuff.
Listen up,
You talk
anybody that breaks down that's thorough on the Panthers.
That
Holiday.
Dave be knowing. You say you know folks. But man, you mentioned South Carolina State not doing any favors to help their defense. That offense. Anemic? Is that probably the best word to describe it?
Yes. That may be one of the adjectives to describe it. I think me and Kelvin Rozier of the ONG Strike Zone was sitting there just looking at the game. And what we know about, because he's been in MEAC forever as a fan, even before the transition to FAMU going into the SWAC. He knows that conference, up and down and sideways. South Carolina State is a power running football team that relies on play action. They weren't able to run the football well. They were able to run it, good in spurts. But if that power running game is not working well, they're not going to be able to pass the ball. I know everyone is down on Corey Fields, but you're talking about an overall effort that was not up to snuff when it came to them running the football. And if they run the football well, Corey Fields looks a whole lot better. You got to also give kudos to that Jackson State defense. Up front, they lost nothing. Now, don't get me wrong. The talent last year, you're talking about you lost the likes of so many people across that forward wall, and even the depth that went with that team. But right now, you're talking about those two DCs right there in the middle. You're not running the football on them right now. And so, with South Carolina State, or you made South Carolina State one-dimensional and you put the ball in Corey Fields' hands, it's not what he does. It isn't. So give kudos to Jackson State, but that South Carolina State offense has not gelled yet in any capacity. There's talent there, but that talent has to develop. And I don't know if you'll see that in Buddy Pugh's final season. I don't know if you'll see that maybe towards the end of the year. They're talented, but they are incredibly young.
Bigger question, or bigger surprise rather, is I guess should be the better phrasing. Jackson State's D-line being as dominant as it was, or South Carolina State's offensive line getting pushed around?
That was the biggest surprise in the game, I think, anyway. South Carolina State doesn't get pushed around in the trenches. You just don't see that traditionally with that squad. If they're going to recruit anything, they're going to recruit trench players. And they got pushed around offensively and defensively along the forward wall, man. So just surprising to see. You're talking about the likes of Jablonsi Green and Patrick Garbaugh. You just don't see that in the South Carolina State squad. So very surprising. But I think schematically, and I said this on Twitter, the pace of Jackson State's offense was incredibly impressive. They ran a play every 10 to 15 seconds and did not give you a chance to rest or catch a wind or anything. They didn't give you a chance to, see what they were doing. And I won't say it's simplistic, but they relied, unlike last year when you're talking about an offensive scheme that relied on mesh routes, with basically crossing routes everywhere, and Shedeur Sanders, dinking and dunking and picking and choosing receivers. This is a run-first team. And so even with that running game, Mulligan, you're talking about J.D. Martin, that offensive line doing what it needs to do to continue running, but the pace in which the plays were coming out and them running, it was incredible. And I think caught South Carolina State just, on skates trying to figure out what they're doing. I also heard this from Jackson State faithful, whether it be through podcasts, got to give credit to both Ken Clark and Zoe Phillips for a second of the 1400 club. Them using the tight end this year was going to be big. They recruited the tight end. They already had a dynamic tight end. And so when you're talking about them using the tight ends, they used them to perfection in this game. So much so that it made the South Carolina State corners and safeties just look crazy. DJ Stevens is right now All-American tight end. Just give it to them. But they have some complimentary tight ends as well that they're going to use in the game. But they're using the tight ends both in the blocking scheme and in the pass game, being able to go out front. I mean, number 25 of South Carolina State just looked completely in no man's land, especially on that last touchdown, the corner route, I think, to DJ Stevens. It was a thing of beauty, especially if you love offensive football.
Yeah. And J.D. Martin went to Wetumpka.
He be cheating. Let me ask you this, Jamie. You mentioned Mulligan. Who was more impressive to you out of him or the quarterback, Jason Brown? Because to me, I think we kind of expected them to be a run-first team. Maybe not with the success they had, but I don't think anybody saw Jason Brown having the performance he had.
Well, man, it was kind of rumors everywhere about who was going to start for this team. You know, the transfer from Syracuse coming in, you know, big time prospect as far as, you know, being familiar with the area, you know, big arm, being able to do all the things you want to see in a quarterback. But Jason Brown was kind of that person all along. If you look at his background, you know, Virginia Tech, you know, you're talking about him being at St. Francis. So he's familiar with programs and he's seasoned. You know, 23, 24, 24, 25. So he knows what to do in this kind of offense. And just in general, being steady, I think you saw a lot of that from him when you're talking about being in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time. Competent quarterback play is what you want in the SWAC in particular. If you can get competent, and I'm not talking about spectacular, I'm talking about competent quarterback play, you have a good chance of winning. And that's what you got in this game. Jason Brown was spectacular in his throws, being able to just get the ball out in the right place. You know, it wasn't going to be, and for all that Shedeur Sanders did last year, especially changing offenses from first year to second year, going to more of a pass scheme where they relied on him. Jason Brown knew that he had a quality running game, that he would have, you know, players on the outside that, you know, give, you know, Rico Powers credit. Give, you know, your other receivers credit, and especially the tight ends, talked about those them earlier. But he did what needed to be done in setting the tone for what the pace of the offense would be. So where am I more surprised by, to be totally honest with you? The running game. Because J.D. Martin was supposed to be the man. But Mulligan came in, ran with power, ran with speed, and ran with balance. One of the phenomenal runs of that night was him staying on his feet, using his arm to keep himself up and still staying on his feet. I love that kind of balance in a back. So right now, man, this is going to be interesting going into this Orange Blossom Classic, because I'm thinking about the contrast. Now, it kind of flips from last year because, fam, you had the game going in to the contest that you thought they were going to be okay. Even though they lost the game to the University of North Carolina, you thought, you know, they were kind of set to be able to take on Jackson State. Well, we all saw what happened with that game. So it'll be interesting to see with Jackson State winning this game and kind of, you know, riding this high. Fam, you sitting back and being able to look at this squad, will it be a flip?
I'm glad you mentioned we're gonna get to the Orange Blossom Classic. Jason Brown, if I'm not mistaken, 22 straight completions. That's like that's EA Sports numbers. Going into the game, we didn't know particularly. We all assumed it'd be Jason Brown. I honestly did not see the passing production that we saw, because I mean, he's not Shedeur, but that was Shedeur light.
Absolutely. I think
Definitely
a lot of people had always had misconceptions about Shedeur in general. And what I mean by that is he wasn't just this bomb thrower going, just throwing downfield. The best thing about Shedeur Sanders was his mind and decision making, knowing where to go with the football. And Jason Brown is showing glimpses of that part, just working within the confines of the offense. If you look at the talent on the outside for Shedeur Sanders, probably right now you would give them, the more talented receivers as a collective. But when you're talking about a quarterback just being able to use what he has as far as the talent around him, Jason Brown right now, for at least one game, has shown the ability just to spread the ball out. And when you talk about 22 straight completions, that is knowledge of the offense, knowledge of where to go with the football immediately, quick decision making, and competency at quarterback. That's what you want. That's all you can ask for in your QB.
With guys like Darius Rashard, Andrew Body, Jeremy Musa, Jason Brown, Tyler Macon, and we hadn't seen him officially, but just we know we've kind of heard Miles Crawley. Are we starting to see a turn of HBCUs focusing more on quarterbacks and quality quarterbacks at that?
Deion Sanders said one of the differences in the SWAC and other FCS conferences is the quarterback play. They said if you had better quarterback play within the conference, you would probably see an elevation of it. Paraphrasing what he said, I would have to agree with him. If you start to see this quarterback play just improve, you're talking about some high flying action going on within the conference. And I think this is, as a collective, this is probably one of the better years that the quarterbacks had the potential to be absolute superstars and be able to lead these offenses. There's a couple of schools that still have questions about who their signal caller is. You mentioned one in talking about Miles Crawley. He has an opportunity. He has an opportunity to elevate that Grambling squad. He really does. Because when you're talking about him transferring and what he was able to do at Alabama State, he probably should have been starting, especially when you're talking about the play last year of Demetrius Davis not being able to necessarily get over the hump. Came in very hyped, still think he shows potential and flashes. But when you're talking about who played QB better overall, you got to give him the nod. But it'll be interesting to see because Grambling with a quarterback, woo, I'm curious to see what they have. And I think when you're talking about the elevation of what that squad can be in this, third year under Hugh Jackson, curious to see what's going to go on. That's my dark horse.
Yeah, second year. So yeah, PV versus everybody said Miles might not even start. If he don't start, Calvez must have had a major jump. Which I think, I think he's going to be
possible. That's very possible, though.
You know what I'm saying? Going from freshman to sophomore year.
And
Jay
you got
White,
look at who they brought in at the offensive coordinator position.
Bingo. Jay White said Quad Brown will be the best QB in the SWAC. So
is that the Georgia Southern transfer?
I think so.
Yes. I didn't get and I got to go back and watch it. The coaches conference, teleconferences from today. But I do know our good brother Mo Carter put out. Coach Maynard said that Quad Brown and Xavier Langston, is it Langford? I'm sorry. Said that he's those two are going to be splitting reps, but that he didn't say how they're going to be split. He just said it was going to be rotational basis or something. I forget how he worded it. Yeah, so going to that. What's good, Simple? Our good man. So
that's what I thought. Georgia State.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I saw that same statement. So we'll see what happens. Connell Maynard is tough on his quarterbacks.
Yeah.
He's tough on his QBs. And so him choosing a QB to come in this system and run it will be very interesting because a lot of people don't know he didn't necessarily pick Akil Glass. He was in the last regime. So he was able to coach him and put him in a quality system. But it'll be interesting to see what he's able to develop as far as those two quarterbacks. I think this is boom or bust time for him as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
Quincy Casey. Somebody, John Horse says, what about Quincy Casey?
I don't know what to tell you right now, man. Because
Casey's still hurt. That's what Jay White said. Casey's still hurt.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, it was kind of a round robin of QBs last year. Mm-hmm. So settling on one, man, is just hard. But again, when you're talking about being hard on quarterbacks, he is one of the hardest. So it'll be interesting to see. I think right now they just want to win. Right now it's about the winning. I don't think they have a set formula for anything.
Yeah. All right. Now I do want to talk big matchups this week. Week 1. So week 0 across all college football. I dubbed it week 0, but WEAK. Week 1 got, has a lot of potential and shapes up very well. I want to start with the Orange Blossom Classic because that game just got a whole lot more interest.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Ant. I'll let you start this thing.
Well, I mean, we all kind of, and I say we, I mean media people, pretty much all kind of gave the East to FAMU. Everybody pretty much conceded it that it was going to be theirs, and Jackson State wasn't going to be. They weren't going to be where they were last year. There was going to be a rebuilding year. It was going to take TC a while to get back to where they were. All that's changed in one game. I mean, Jamie kind of mentioned it earlier. Last year, the team that had all the hype going into it, Jackson State, everybody kind of thought that FAMU getting that week 0 game with North Carolina would kind of give them the edge, but we saw what happened there. Flip the roles this year. FAMU has all the hype coming into the season of being the East champions and potentially making it to the Celebration Bowl. And Jackson State gets their week 0 game to work all the kinks out. But will it be the same? Will it be the same scenario play out to where Jackson State gets blown out, or will Jackson State, answer this year and kind of be a repeat of what happened last year with Jackson State handling FAMU? I don't think anybody knows what to expect anymore going into this game after what they saw last week.
There's some curiosities when it comes to just this game that I have. How much will Jeremy Musa miss Xavier Smith? Mm-hmm. He relied on him heavily last year. And so I've been told that the receiving core is still intact and maybe in some cases better. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to see who Musa will rely on in that pass game. Will the running game of FAMU be able to complement the pass game enough to keep Jackson State off balance? If you look at the first half, even of the MEAC SWAC challenge, South Carolina State, had they scored, would have been in the game in the first half, because I think it was 17-0 going into the half or close. And so I think, is Jackson State one of those teams that can just score? We know they can score in bunches. They did that in the second half. But will they start out being able to score? I also think the back end, and with everyone being in place as far as the coaching staff for FAMU, it provides a little more continuity. So I think they'll be a little bit better against what Jackson State is doing, but they are also going against a different kind of offense in Jackson State. This is not that pass happy set. This is, they got to stop the run. They got to be able to guard against play action. It is a little bit different offense. Not necessarily, again, I talked about the pace earlier, not necessarily one that's looking to go downfield or score within the pass game as quick, but they run plays in bunches. And so will FAMU be able to handle that kind of pace? Athletically, I think they'll be just fine. The psychological part is what I'm kind of, the chess match within it all. When you're talking about Willie Simmons, when you're talking about TC Taylor going into this game, I think, he got the proverbial monkey off his back in winning this game in Atlanta. For some people anyway, I think, so much has been bantered about, the SWAC being able to win in Atlanta and things of that nature. But I think it's just coincidence more than it is anything. It was just a matter of them getting over the hump. But I also think going into this game, it is interesting because you're talking about 2 years ago, it being a 7-6 game, last year being an absolute blowout. What will the game be this year? So the game within the game, it is what I'm looking for within the matchups. But can Jeremy Musa start hot and remain that way? Because right now, he's the preseason player of the year, or picked to be player of the year. We'll see, can he live up to the hype?
Yeah, I think another matchup that's really intriguing to me is we mentioned Jackson State's defensive line earlier, and FAMU, they put a lot of resources recruiting-wise in the trenches. How will those guys they bring in hold up to what we saw that D-line of Jackson State, what they could be? And then on the flip side of that, can Jackson State's offense push around FAMU's defensive line like they did South Carolina State? I think the trenches is going to kind of determine who wins this game. You could say that about any game, but because of the style of play of these two teams, I think that's really going to determine it. If the defensive line of Jackson State can make Musa uncomfortable, having him forcing him out the pocket where we know he doesn't like to be, I think that could be a difference maker. And if they're able to lean on that defensive line of FAMU and get that running game going like we saw last week, it could be a long day for FAMU.
Absolutely. I also think the secondary of Jackson State was not tested in this game. Now they were, I think Corey Fields had his opportunities in places. And you saw some of that getting some pass interference calls, but I think they'll be tested in this game. You talked about trench play. If that's a wash, in other words, they even each other out.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what the passing game versus the Jackson State secondary will be. Sayers Guthrie coming over from Dale State, played well in the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Played well. You saw him fly around and be able to do some things. Didn't get much of a test, but you did see his presence within the game. But they'll get tested in this because at the nature of who Willie Simmons is, he wants to throw the ball around. What you hope doesn't happen is that he gets so pass happy that they don't test the front seven for Jackson State.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. D-Lob 2010. What's good, man? Says, will FAMU have the same home run mistakes as South Carolina State did? I think this game will be closer this time. So I'll tell you one thing. The first thing I noticed, the opening drive, being that it was opening drive, what the offense did, I didn't, what I'm saying? I was like, oh, it's opening drive, maybe jitters, they'll move on. But when the punter dropped the ball twice and then shanked it, I felt like at that point I was like, they shook. I think I tweeted out that and you muted too. I think I tweeted out that Corey Fields looks like he has no confidence.
Yeah, it was all mental.
I believe that too, man. Because Corey Fields has been through a lot in the last year and a half. Being injured towards the end of last season, the highest of the highs, winning the Celebration Bowl, coming back in this season, not really doing well, getting off to such a bad start, and then being injured at the end of the year. So I guess the lowest of the lows, football-wise anyway, and then coming back into this season, you didn't know what the confidence was going to be. And when you're talking about this generation in general, when you're talking about the likes of social media, when you're talking about, you hear those crickets, you hear the chirping going on. So I think he absolutely came into this season wanting to prove that he is a quality quarterback within the MEAC, but this game really didn't do anything to solidify that place within his confidence. Now I'm curious to see how they do or what approach they take for the rest of the year. But But this game is just so interesting in me, to me, because the chess match between the offenses and the defenses, is telling. FAMU recruited well. They used the transfer portal well. So you're talking about, and only if you're within those circles that you pay attention to HBCU recruiting, that FAMU did well within that. Can they take those players and finally get over the hump? I think it's more psychological than it is anything else, because the talent is there. The talent is absolutely there.
Another game that is big on the docket this weekend: Texas Southern Prairie View.
Oh yeah,
it's huge.
That's gonna be an important one, man.
It's huge, man. It's just so many things going on. Is Andrew Body completely healthy? Most say yes, he is. He's that and ready to go. What I worry about within that game, honestly, is the psychological advantage as well, because they lost that game last year. So when you're talking about going up against PV, going against that rival, can you get over the hump? Because as much as they had some highlights last year, shutting out Southern, shutting them out completely, are they able to have enough offensive firepower to score enough points? Because PV's gonna play defense. Bubba McDowell, that's the calling card. They're gonna run the football, they're gonna play good defense. Can they sustain enough offense to be able to make PV have to show their hand offensively? Because yes, they've gotten some pieces and some transfers. You got Caleb Johnson that came over there, so they've improved the running game. But can they make Connolly be a passer? Can they make him be a passer? And that's kind of the goal that you want to have when you're talking about facing the PV squad, because them going into shootouts is not necessarily conducive to what Bubba wants. That's not the kind of game that he wants to get into. He wants to run the football and play good defense, make sure that he saves whatever is happening for their defense to be fresh, so they could be at a premium. So Andrew Body in that offense, and I know there was some issues, offensive coordinator wise, of letting Andrew cook, and I think they should. But if they can score enough points early, I think they'll be just fine, because they turn PV into a one-dimensional offensive team.
Yeah, and the biggest thing to me is how much has Conley progressed as a passer? How much has he developed as a thrower? How much is he in sync with his receivers? And can they take that next step as an offense and not be so one-dimensional, to where they don't put their defense in such a bind by making them keep teams under 20 points pretty much, because their offense is only going to do so much running the football. It's going to be a good chess match, like you talked about earlier, with the defense of PV and the offense of Texas Southern. Which unit can will their team to a victory is what it's going to come down to.
I believe that's
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Yeah. I'm looking at this. I know we talked to both, both sets of players at SWAC Media Day. Prairie View came in with the mindset of we've been disrespected. We feel disrespected. We finna come out and show the SWAC that, we still PV. Texas Southern came in with, we about to show everybody what we can do when we healthy, and we got it all together. And it was kind of the messaging of we got something to prove was all over Texas. But it's just like I really want to see Andrew Body with and no disrespect, this is gonna sound like a slight, but a real receiving core. So that's what I'm looking forward to see. And then Prairie View, if they can get any semblance of quarterback play, what do we see? They could have won the West last year.
Yes.
What's crazy to me is I don't know, man. The whole disrespect card, because PV kind of did the same thing the year before, in that them changing coaches and people believe they were gonna fall completely off a cliff. They came in with the disrespect card, and for a while they were, the front runners in the West.
Mhm.
So what ended up happening to them is them losing a couple of games here and there, and then people figuring out that they were one-dimensional on offense. That's what kind of led them to their spiral. Now, again, they did well. Don't get me wrong, but I think they have to improve. They have to be able to throw the ball in spots. I'm not saying you got to be, throwing the ball for 500 yards a game, but you have to be able to make throws when possible. And if they are able to do that, I believe in the defense. I believe in their running game. But I think Conley has to make some throws to be able to keep defensive teams off balance. And if that doesn't happen, you can feel as disrespected as you like, but if you don't score anything but 10 to 15 points, then you're going to still remain in that same spot, especially when you're talking about the teams they have to face in the West. The likes of Southern, who hopefully you'll be able to score the ball this year. We'll see. Yes, who's gonna come with that monster running back, Mr. Howard. So when you're talking about teams that can score, they have to be able to do the same thing to compete. And it's a viable thought, viable philosophy, and viable question of whether or not they can.
Yeah. We were just talking about Doc. He riding high. He over there. Doc riding high.
Oh yeah.
I think Doctor did a show every 5 minutes on the hour. Every hour on the hour, every 5 minutes. Just
Listen,
to let y'all know.
I caught Doc at the end. I left Center Park Stadium and caught Doc because I asked the question right before I left, because I left a little early because I'm like, why? Why am I staying here? And I know the traffic, so I know, hey, it's time to bounce. But called Doc at the end, him and She Loves Thee. Got to give a shout out to her. But yeah, man, called them at the end, and Jackson State is riding high right now. So kudos to that fan base.
That game just put another battery in their back.
Oh yeah.
Hey, finna.
Well deserved, though.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back to that too. At the end, I'm gonna come back to that. But before we get, too far ahead, let's talk about the other Labor Day Classic. The slump, get slumped in the gump. You know what I'm saying? The folding chair capital of the world. Let's talk about this. Southern versus Alabama State. This game
it's gonna be the battle of which quarterback can play better.
I want to. So there was a video that came out probably a week ago. It was the backup quarterback threw a nice, pretty little seam route down the sideline, and it dropped right in the wide receiver hand, and he walked in the end zone. This is like one-on-ones. I'm hearing D Davis had a really good, is healthy and is looking better in fall camp. Does he last the whole game though?
That was his question last year.
Yeah.
Now this time I'm wondering if he lasts the whole game, meaning he's healthy, but does he get pulled?
It depends on how it goes. I think Coach Eddie Robinson is committed to him. But I would hope, and I think, just knowing him and meeting him and just knowing how intense he is and how much he loves Alabama State, he's committed to winning more. Okay. And so
that's been my question, Jamie. And is he committed to a fault? Which, granted, Davis is not a bad quarterback. And when we talk to the guys, we talk to Bubba, and God, I keep forgetting his name. The running back, number 8, Howell. When we talked to them, they said something and it reminded me. I was like, you know what, you're right. Because a lot of times we put expectations on players. It was like he was a freshman last year. Yeah, he was a freshman. So
the expectations were high. I mean, him coming out of high school, for example, was through the roof. They thought this kid was going to be the next coming of Cam Newton. You know what I'm saying? So I think when you have those kind of expectations, I think it was Duncanville, high school. I think it came out of there. I think the expectations were high, and so when you're talking about the way that it was perceived, him coming to Alabama State, and him elevating what that offense would be, because don't get me wrong, that defense is legit.
North Shore,
excuse me.
Yeah.
That defense of Alabama State was legit. Colton Adams, and others. My man Maddox from the crib.
Yeah.
You're talking about
having
players that can stop people, that can stop offenses. You just needed a little bit of offense, kind of similar to PV, in that two defensive coaches that played in the pros that want their offenses to basically put their defense in a better position. You have to have competent quarterback play. I'll lean on that, because I think people want their quarterbacks to be superstars. They don't have to be. They just need to be competent enough to be able to move an offense. And so when you had like some Miles Crawley leaving the program, both of these squads have quarterbacks in question. Can Harold Blood lead this Southern attack? Because that Dooley relies on his quarterbacks, and it also is committed to a person, to a fault. To a fault a lot of times. A lot of people question his decision making when it came to Bashawn McCray. So when you're talking about, okay, Harold Blood came to media day, this is your guy, but in spots last year did not look good. So we'll see what happens this year, and will he have the notion to pull him in a spot? I know that Southern faithful will lose their mind if Harold Blood's in there not performing, and he still remains in there in that position.
I think Southern has a little bit more of an out though. They got a stable of backs.
Yes, they do.
They can rely on. And our man, Gary Quarles, he looked renewed back there in that backfield from the videos I've seen. He looked like he like, hey, I'm back. I got something to prove.
Yes, and he knows the conference. So they can rely on the running game. The one thing that negates that running game to some degree is Coach Dooley's wanting to be able to throw the ball, or him wanting to throw the ball and not leaning on that running game. So I'm curious to see how that occurs, making them one-dimensional to some degree, or having some diversity enough to be able to keep teams off balance. So, a lot of people have questioned whether or not Coach Dooley, which I'm not going to say people don't have the right to do so. He's been in this league a long time, knows the culture, knows what goes on in this league. But at the same time, his reliance upon the passing game and his commitment to stick with individuals and not, pull the trigger to either replace them or stubborn in that right. What will happen when it comes to him and his selection process of a quarterback, or him sticking with that same QB? Will that impede Southern from actually winning? Will be the question. And people have the right to ask that question after last season.
Yeah. Another game. Actually, before we go to this game, because all the games we've mentioned have been HBCU versus HBCU. Are there any HBCU and PWI or P5 or G5 games that interest you in week one?
Oh yeah, man. My own school. You know what it is.
Oh yeah.
North Carolina A&T
speaking of that
versus UAB.
Yeah, Dave said A&T versus UAB. A&T will cover the spread. Now to believe in Dilfer as the head coach.
Yeah, I saw today it was like what 30, 28 and a half.
28 and a half. Yeah. I saw it.
I think, yeah. I will say I haven't heard much about not believing Dilfer as a head coach. I have it on good authority for some friends, and as well.
Mhm.
The last regime under Bill Clark and even the interim coach that they had last year did a lot to reach back out to the alumni and have them, come around the program. Give them every year, they give them a tour of the facilities and stuff and talk with them and kind of do like a little bash or something like that. Dilford didn't do that, and he's able to do his own thing with his, so how he runs his program, but not reaching out to the guys who built that program. It's kind of it's kind of shocking. I think I don't know if he's in over his head.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Trent Dilfer always comes off as
the smartest man in the room.
Yeah. That's kind of how that's wrapped up. Just smug as all get up. And his college career was great. His pro career, won a Super Bowl. Did his thing.
Listen, he was on the Super Bowl winning team.
Okay,
he was a starting quarterback.
I'll give you that. But as a coach, he's unproven. We don't know what he's going to do yet. And when you're talking about a proud program that was shut down for a short period of time, you better reach back out to the alumni, because that's in turn who got that program restarted. The outrage. So you better make sure that you connect with them wholeheartedly. You can't think that you're so high and mighty that these little people around you, don't deserve to have their say within certain circles. But just to the game in general, there are a lot of unknowns when it comes to both of these squads, and to have that spread, be so much. I think I'm like Dave. I think A&T does cover the spread. Not to say they'll make the upset, but it's, don't get me wrong, it's happened before. Maybe not necessarily with this squad, but things like this have happened before. Now, I'm not gonna go out on that limb, but what I will say is A&T's cupboard was not bare. If you study the squad, I know a lot of people like to talk about Bashul Tootin, going on to Virginia Tech. I know, people like to talk about Jacob Roberts being at Wake Forest, and others going on to different places. But I think I believe in Vincent Brown, head coach Vincent Brown. I'm a little biased when it comes to it, but I believe in the culture that he's trying to set. And I think when you're talking about the likes of Eli Brickhallen, when you're talking about the quarterbacks that are coming in, people are coming in and competing right away. They've released the depth chart today. And there are some surprises on there because there were some players from the last regime that got significant time that are fighting, for where they stand with this squad, and rightfully so, because you're talking about coaching turnover. I think only 2 coaches remain from the last regime. And so they're going to run the football. They're going to play good defense. That's going to be the mark of a Vincent Brown squad. But he's also adaptable when it comes to what they're going to do offensively and defensively, for that matter. So I'll be curious to see just how they'll approach this game, because from a culture standpoint, they want them to be elite. That has been the mantra really this entire summer since he's gotten hired, in being able to compete in the Coastal Athletic Association. And so this game will go a long way to kind of see just where they stand from a competency standpoint, and whether or not there's been buy-in. Now, I've heard from players that have graduated. They told me directly it was time for a change. And what I mean by that is from a discipline standpoint. As much as Sam Washington was beloved, going from that Rod Broadway tree, I think they believed where the school was going, it was time for a change. And I think Vincent Brown was the perfect hire for where they were trying to go. And what I mean by that is someone that knows Power 5 football, CAA football, and HBCU football. And it was the perfect marriage of them all. And so I'm curious to see what this team looks like, because they worked hard this summer. You've seen their social media presence. You've seen a lot of different things that you're not accustomed to seeing when it comes to A&T football. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what occurs.
Yeah. I think seeing Jackson State play the way they did under the new regime with the amount of turnover that they had has got to be good inspiration for North Carolina A&T fans, so they can, you know what I'm saying? Not saying that y'all gonna have the same result, but it's shown that it can be done in one off season with a lot of turnover with a new staff, that you can still come out and play solid football week 1. And that's all that you got to do to cover the spread against the UAB team who's going through the exact same thing. So, I mean, 28.5 points is a lot when both teams have a lot of turnover, new head coaches, and you don't really know what you're getting from either team. So I'm with both of y'all. I'm taking that 28.5 all day with A&T.
Yeah. What's good? Penn came in and said, happy birthday. Number C, 50 ain't bad. I want y'all to know, when God said, let there be light, Penn played the first football game at night. Appreciate you, Penn. But man, another game that interests me, not necessarily score-wise, but it's just stay with me here. Last year, Alabama A&M played UAB. I think that game, with some of the injuries that were sustained and things that happened, that game changed the course of A&M season. With that said, they're playing Vanderbilt this year.
Yeah,
in Nashville. That it worries me if they get nicked up. That because Jay White on here been saying they're gonna go 5-1. I said that they were gonna finish second in the West. I mean, I'm sorry, second in the East. Behind FAMU. And I'm a little worried, especially what I saw out of Jackson State. So
yeah, I think the East is interesting, man, because you could very easily fall under the FAMU bandwagon.
You can make an argument for the least top 4 at least.
Yeah, you can make that argument. I myself, and I've gone on record and said this, I think Jackson State wins it. Wins the East. I think I said it before I thought it started, because I think I play with feelings a lot. And what I mean by that is just hunches when it comes to the boulder on their shoulders going into this season.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. And I didn't even mean to do that. I just thought about that. But yeah. I mean, just the absolute, them going into this season, wanting to prove the naysayers wrong. And the amount of talent, because it's very easy to say they lost a bunch of talent, but it's also very easy to say they are one of the top 5 recruiting classes, or had one of the top 5 recruiting classes in FCS football. So that remains that they are one of the most talented groups within the FCS. So if that still occurs, you're still relying on coaching at that point, brought in competent coaches. And I think if they're able to sustain and grow off of what you saw the other day, and I know people are questioning South Carolina State's talent and what kind of team they are, but at the same time, they had to get over that hump. And so I think this game goes a long way to determine what it ought to be. But Alabama A&M, I'm just not sure, man, because I'm kind of old school in the approach that if you have multiple quarterbacks, you really don't have one. So we'll see.
We'll be talking about Texas A&M. Texas A&M probably finished third in the no, I'm just playing. They'll finish third in the MEAC. I mean the SIAC. Speaking of that, Red Tails Classic.
Oh,
it's gonna be another good one. That's also gonna be in the Gump. That's ironically, that's actually a lot closer to what the action was anyway.
Yep.
But Fort Valley State Tuskegee. Tuskegee dropped this one last year and then went on a nice little run. Hold up, did they? That was that last year, or was that the year before? I'm thinking about.
No, it was last year too.
Was it last year? Okay. I don't know why I was thinking they went into the championship game undefeated. I don't know. No, they didn't. They lost to Alabama. How can I? Forgive me. But anyway, Fort Valley State, Tuskegee, off a championship, run. Do they bounce back and get a season opener though against Fort Valley State?
New era, the Aaron James era. Had been their offensive coordinator, and so their approach in this game, for me, is important because Fort Valley beat them badly in the last couple of years. It hadn't even been close. When you're talking about Kelvin Durham, and you're talking about, who one of the up there for player of the year, offensive player of the year. I'm curious to see what the defense will look like for Tuskegee. Now, Tuskegee improved. If you look at that team from start to finish, at least up until the Benedict game, the last game wasn't their finest hour either in the championship game. But I think that, going into the end of Reggie Ruffin into the Aaron James era, I think it'll be curious to see what approaches they have, because the head coach is the ultimate person who sets the tone for everything going on, regardless of whether you're the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. So who knows? Aaron James may run the ball more or pass the ball more. It just depends on his philosophy. But he's another one of those alums coming back to his school to coach this squad. So whether or not he instills a little something extra within this squad to be able to take this game, I'll be curious to see. But Fort Valley under Sean Gibbs is going to run the football, and they're going to run the football, and they're going to run the football some more. And then they're going to go over the top with Kelvin Durham, and then they're going to run the football. They're going to run the football. If you can't stop that power running game, you're going to have a long day, because they're going to continue to give it to you. And so I'll be curious to see, because, if you've never been to one, man, that is a great event. The Crandall Bowl really does set it out.
I'm so glad they redid the Crampton Bowl too.
Yeah,
it's really nice. Because now I was in high school, it was literally it was a bowl. It was upside down though, like the field would like curve over.
Wow.
Yeah, you can literally be on your sideline, and you can look over and will see the top of the helmets of the other team. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. The questions, I guess, about Tuskegee have I think it's been size. Like their trench players are undersized. I'm not gonna say small, they're undersized.
Yeah, that is one of the questions. And I think because they also got a late start recruiting. Even though, they had a lot of people, I think, sick, and I think it was, their spring wasn't as smooth. And even going into the summer, they were still trying to recruit trench players. So that is a huge question. And if they're not up to snuff, they can get run over. Because what I'm going to tell you is, even though, you're talking about the quarterback being one of those, in talking about Fort Valley, being one of those people that could be player of the year, they're still going to run the football. So they better get ready for it. And you want a good showing, especially in your home state. So we'll see. But yeah, trench players have been a question.
I want to talk more about the SIAC because not many people have talked about it. I know we hadn't talked about it quite as much as we want to. How is what was I guess you could say the thoughts of the media at Media Day as far as who was going to come out of the SIAC? Because it's divisionless now. So I can't say east, west, or north, south, or
yeah, man, it's going to be interesting because I think when you're talking about Benedict repeating, they have a question at signal caller. With the likes of Eric Phoenix moving on, you're bringing in a new quarterback. A quarterback that's on the roster has done it before, but nonetheless, a new signal caller. Eric Phoenix had a phenomenal year last year. And so can whoever steps into that role be able to duplicate what's going on? Now, what I will say is we talked about the backfield of Southern. Well, the backfield of Benedict is phenomenal as well. You're talking about Zaire Scotland, You talking about DeAndre Duhart, and they brought in one of the wide receivers to actually get in the backfield as well. So they're going to run the football first. Can whoever steps into that role, and I know during the spring game, Coach Chennisberry talked about, 3 possible quarterbacks being able to step in that role. Can one of them just fulfill what they need done? Because they have a great wide receiving core, they are phenomenal from top to bottom. So when you're talking about can a person just be able to deliver the football, offensively, they're fine. Defensively, same thing with Benedict. You're talking about the likes of Luba Danellis, John Hannibal, and others being able to just carry, everything that you need when it comes to defensive line play and trench play in general. They have everything there to be able to repeat. Now, you have some squads that are there. Tuskegee, we talked about already. You're talking about Fort Valley with Kelvin Durham and others. A lot of people surprisingly talked about Albany State. Now, they've been up there, but you're talking about a coaching change, a philosophy change. Quint, going from a run-first squad to now, Quinn Gray wants to be able to throw the ball all around the yard. Now, he said he'll adapt to the personnel he has there. But at the same time, if passing is in you, it's in you, especially if you're the play caller. So, changing regimes, I'll be curious to see what Albany State eventually becomes. But you have some squads that have really good offensive football, such as Allen University, who hadn't been picked last in a long time. You're talking about really fully engulfing themselves into the conference. They have, a great offensive staff, and head coach Teddy Keaton, who, has forgotten more offensive football than I know. So they'll be straight. They can keep David Wright upright. They'll be just fine as well. They'll be able to beat some people. But, you're talking about those big 3. Benedict, it is their conference to lose because they have so much coming back overall. It's just a matter of, can they get over because I think that playoff loss kind of set them back as far as what they have to do to ascend to that next level. And Chennisberry always keeps them humble. He keeps the main thing. Very passionate man of God, and wants them to just continue working. I think he said, chopping wood and and doing what he does. So I think they're right up there to continue. But there's some schools that have really big question marks in the SIAC, such as Kentucky State making a full scale flip in their football team, going from running the triple option to running the spread offense at this point under Felton Huggins. So curious to see what they do. Elwood Waters has athletes. They're able to run the football. You got Hagee, running there. When you're talking about Clark Atlanta, can they take that next step? Because when you're talking about the likes of Willie Slater, who has forgotten more football than we'll ever know as well. Yeah. You saw some glimpses of them being able to do things. It is just their size that oftentimes gets in the way. Can they recruit that, those players? They'll have the knowledge. Can they have the size? Can they get the Jimmies and the Joes that be able to compete? Morehouse, huge question mark. Huge. They hired a coach late in Gerald Wiltshire. They got recruited, didn't recruit well early because they didn't have a coach. They're behind in so many ways. So we'll see what goes on with them. They're getting some big tests on the road early. I think, going to New York, going to other spots. We'll see what happens with them. But who am I forgetting?
Who was third place? The third place pick in the order prediction.
Oh wow! I want to say it might have been Tuskegee because I want to say it was definitely Benedict first.
Yeah,
I can't remember if it was Fort Valley or if it was Tuskegee interchange, but Albany State was in the mix as well, right up there, and that was the surprising one to me, only because of.
I think it was Albany State because I remember saying to myself, or they might have been second, whoever it was. I just kept saying to myself, they just got a new coach. They lost a lot. I don't know. It was Albany State, and I was like, "How? Why are they picked second? I couldn't figure that out."
I think it's a matter of who they have coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Deontay Banu at quarterback. I think they had a phenomenal running game, but I think the philosophy is changing so much that you have to question why in the world they would be picked second, because they did lose a lot of defensive talent, and they're not going to be the same defensively. So that was a head scratcher too, but still a very talented ball club. But I want to see how the coach and that new staff infuses with those players that are returning.
Yeah. Miles, you mentioned Miles, Savannah State, and Central State. Those were your three.
Central State is going to beat Central State will surprise some people. Called a couple of their games last year. And I tell you what, man, the offensive and defensive talent is there. Coach Kevin Porter has done a great job in being able to recruit. He's talked about, recruiting the state of Ohio and being able to bring those players in. And that spread offense that they run, they score points. They gave Tuskegee, a heck of a run last year. They ended up playing that game in the Cranberry Bowl. We talked about that, in that facility in general, and it was a phenomenal game. But Central State is going to give some people headaches. I don't know if they can take that next step in that upper echelon, but they are definitely a team to deal with. Miles, if they can settle on a quarterback, I think Coach Sam Shade, you saw some glimpses, but they just could not put together really good offensive football. And I know some people on that staff, they were disappointed in just how they performed offensively. And so if they can turn that around, because Sam Shade's a heck of a coach. He's talking about, his pedigree coming from the University of Alabama, been a winner all his life, going into the high school ranks, being a state champion, state championship coach on the high school ranks, can recruit. So I think it's just a matter of time going into his second year of turning that program around, who's won under Reginald Ruffin the last several years. And I think they want to get back to contention. I think, who do we leave off? No, we're talking about Central State, Miles. Oh, and Savannah State. Listen, Savannah State surprised some people last year after a head-scratching loss to an NAIA squad. I think they lost to, I don't know if it was Florida Memorial or another squad early on, or Northeastern, not sure, forgot. But give kudos to that coaching staff as well, being able to kind of right the ship and really just discovering who they are, going from more of an option game to more of a standard, offensive attack, I formation, handing off the ball, downfield passing attack. So they kind of converted in what they do regularly as well. So curious to see if they can take that next step up. Right now, just not sure of what they'll be going forward.
Yeah. No slack in the SWAC. Jump said, "What's good? First time checking in. Hey, appreciate you for coming in, man." But he comes back and said, "What are your thoughts on Valley and Central State matchup this weekend?"
Listen, don't be surprised if Central State springs the upset. Don't be surprised. When you talking about Delta State winning, and Delta State's a phenomenal D2 program. But like I said, again, when it comes to Central State's offense, they're able to score points. So if Valley is not careful, I fully expect that they win the ball game. But I won't be shocked if Central State, pulls it out.
Yeah, I'm a believer in Coach Wade. From what I've seen him pull in recruiting wise,
yeah, they've done well.
Yeah, I've been telling y'all, I messed with him about it. I said the way Valley recruiting, I said they're gonna be complaining more than about the grass down there. And he was like, "Hey, don't worry about it. We got that fixed. We'll address that. We got somebody to come in and cut the grass." Man, but let's talk about a real quick CIAA. I ain't, I didn't think it was gonna be here this long, Jamie. I know it's later.
Oh, it's all good, man. It's all good.
CIAA. What's your thoughts as far as how that's looking? I think so. I'm looking at predicted order finish, and they had one up top too. Kind of like Albany State's like that. Really Fayetteville State. They got them at 1.
I think only because they won it last year, man.
Mm-hmm.
But Fayetteville State lost a ton of talent through both the portal and just graduation. So I'm curious to see what that team looks like. So I think the predicted order of finish was kind of last year's thoughts more than it was anything else. But Bowie State, who's won that conference several years under the last regime, is one of those squads that's coming up with head coach Kyle Jackson up there, who's been under Damon Wilson and others. They just keep that pipeline kind of going, being able to recruit that area. And I think last year's step back for them was surprising, but I also think they're hungry to get back in contention. And so I think they'll be up there. The likes of Virginia Union with Jada Byers. Please give them their props. But lost their quarterback. And so I'm curious to see if teams just stack the box and make them throw the ball. But you're talking about Jada Byers almost running for 2,000 yards last year. So they should be up there. Virginia State is one of those dark horses that also could be in contention. I'll tell you what, really phenomenal game between them two last year. Between Bowie State and Virginia Union, also Virginia State being in contention as well. But Bluefield State coming in, picked 5th, if I'm not mistaken, coming in. Look,
they are
that team.
Yeah, they're 5th in the North Division, 9th overall.
Okay, so yeah, which was surprising, being that they're brand new coming into the conference. They've been there before, of course, historically, but yeah, coming in. So
coming into the conference, brand new program, period.
Just coming in. So when you're talking about what the CIAA will be, don't sleep on some of those perennial bottom feeders as well. Johnson C. Smith under Maurice Flowers, Tyrell Jackson at quarterback. They're going to surprise some folks. They are going to surprise some folks because I think they have that SIAC pedigree. Got some transfers from Fort Valley in the past before their regime changed that came up there to Charlotte. So I think they're going to surprise some people as well. But the likes of Lincoln, PA, and Elizabeth City State, has done well. Showed some flashes last year, being able to do some things. But I think one of the games coming up this weekend, in fact, the Carolinas Classic between Benedict and Shaw. Shaw has knocked on the door and just cannot seem to open it. For losing this game, losing that game, just that one game to knock them out of contention. We'll see if they can finally get over the hump. And I think it is an interesting test this weekend when they travel to Benedict for the Carolinas Classic. It might be a game I actually try to get to, either that or might try to get to that southern game, actually trying to get them Montgomery. But I got to get some, see if I can get some tickets or see if I know a couple of sources.
Yeah.
Sources might still be on this live.
Yeah.
So I'm reaching out, sir. Reaching out. But so we'll see what happens. But yeah, man, I think that Carolinas Classic will go a long way to see what Shaw is doing. But the CIAA is always interesting when it comes to football. Winston-Salem State being a program, just hadn't been able to win in so long and just have struggled. I know some people that love that program, that proud program. I don't like what I'm seeing from it. Even though I'm an A&T grad, anybody in the Triad area, you don't want to see them falter. But Fayetteville State, I don't necessarily think deserving is probably not the right word. It'll sound a little more harsh than what it is. But I think with the amount of people that they've lost, them being picked first is kind of iffy. But we'll see what happens. And I think Bowie State with that pedigree is right up there. Them and Virginia State's to lose. Virginia Union's to lose.
No slack in the SWAC says my cousin Nick Sanders coaches at Elizabeth City. He was the interim coach at one time.
Yeah, man. Elizabeth City is a proud program, man. They've lost for a long time, and they were tough. I mean, it was just, you had the likes of Shawan in the area. You're talking about it's a hard recruiting ground only because of where their location is. Because if you go north, you're right there in the Tidewater area of Virginia. You have several schools that you're competing with, Virginia Union and Virginia State. You also, if you're talking about MEAC schools, you got Norfolk State right there, Hampton in the area. So it's tough recruiting grounds. If you come south, you're really in no man's land when it comes to who you're bringing in. So it's kind of tough. So, but I think really it starts with the administration, president, athletic directors. They've really done a lot social media wise and just bringing some attention to the school. And I think they're improving. And not to say that's going to translate to wins automatically, but you see flashes of what they're able to do.
Yeah. All right. Ant, you got anything before we get up out of here?
All right, man. Just wrapped up both conferences.
Yes. I do want to say, I knew what I was going to get at about the MEAC SWAC challenge. Did the MEAC come in a little too cocky?
I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw somebody say that it's a lot different whenever you don't have an extra time to rest and all the coaches in the conference ain't helping you. That's all I'm going to say.
You know what, man? I think that got overblown when it comes to Trey Oliver. I do think the tight-knitness of the coaches within the MEAC says something. When you're talking about Sam Washington being on the sideline, when you're talking about Rob Broadway, we talking about others, like they stick together. It's not, I think you have real rivalries when it comes to coaches in the SWAC. I think there's some that don't like each other. Period.
Oh, I just think I know it's some that don't like each other.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I think that's reflective of the area, because you can look at the same thing in the SEC. There are coaches that do not like each other, that I would beg to say hate each other. So yeah, but I think when it comes to those 6 schools and bonding and being tight, and cockiness, I do think so.
Yeah. I should have known TC was the real deal when Coach Maynard said that's who he'll pick to be his phase partner. If he had to pick a phase partner, it was TC.
Look, man, TC, man, I love TC's personality. And I think they could not have done any better. Overall, it's very easy to say you can go get a famous coach and you can go get a name. But at the same time, you have it says something. It says something about the amount of work and the amount of buy-in when it comes to somebody that graduated from a college, that played there, played at a high level and won. It says something about him coming back to his alma mater and just how hard he'll work. You know what I'm saying, for that school. And so, when it comes to just what that hire would be, I always thought that it would be TC, because TC was a phenomenal player at Jackson State. He was both as a quarterback and a receiver. So and he understands the history and the culture of that place. And so I thought it would be no one better. And also, it says something. I said it earlier. Him knowing and coaching in the MEAC, says something about him being able to prepare for that. It's very easy to say that, all right, we're just playing this conference. But he knows what the rivalries there are and what kind of ball it is. Because I've always said, and shout out to the Dr. Cavill, we've always gotten into this argument about the style of football when it comes to the MEAC versus the SWAC. I think there's a style difference. Whether or not the time between the Celebration Bowl gives the MEAC an advantage, I can't deny it. I can't deny it at the end of the day. I can't say it's not. But I also think, look at last year's game. If it gave them an advantage, I can't see it. You can make the argument about the year before when South Carolina State won, what was 31-10?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, so I think you can make the argument either way. But I think you're a drop pass from winning that game, or at least tying it last year. And you're maybe some offensive stops or some defensive stops away from doing the same thing. But I just think you got against a talented North Carolina Central squad with Davius Richard really just carrying that team on his back. So, you know, we'll see. But I can understand the SWAC feeling that way. I can't make the argument against it.
Yeah. What's good, Kelly? Kelly Flicks.
Yes, sir.
Kelly.
I think he got Kelly, you got a show coming up in a little bit, don't it? Or am I tripping? I think he got one about 20 minutes or so. But Jamie, before we get up out of here, man, let's go ahead and tell us about where people can find you. If I'm not mistaken, you're trying to get some sponsorships too.
Man, listen, man. Look. If you're looking at this, I am a coach of a middle school football team. We need money. I got about 4 boys. Now I spent my own money, you know, other people's money. I got about 4 boys that still need sponsorships. Now we've tried to, you know, put it as cheaply as possible, $200 a piece for uniforms, insurance, food, that kind of stuff, within 40 boys. We got 4 left. And like I said, we're scraping by, like I said, even coming out of my own pockets. So if you have anything that you can donate to these kids on Cash App, Clements F Ball. Clements F Ball. I don't care if it's $1, $10, $20, $500. It's going straight to them. It's not going to me at all. It's going straight to them just to sponsor their uniforms and things of that nature. So if you got it in your heart or you want to zeal it to me, hey, you can DM me at Sport Voice JW on Twitter and Threads. So Sport Voice JW, we'll talk about it. Thanks to those that already have donated. Hey, man, it's been, you know, like I said, in whatever amounts, but we got it down to 4 at this point. So, hey, man, I appreciate you just giving me the platform to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I know that. I saw that earlier. I said, yeah, we got to make sure he plugged that. But, man, it's good to talk with you, man, catch up with you. We missed that media day. We didn't get lost, you know what I'm saying?
Man, look. Man, them cats, man, look, we'd always talk. And then all of a sudden we walking around looking for a room and just, hey, who knows? Hey, man, we just met each other before we got into the room. So yeah, man, miss media day, man, but duty calls, job change, and I had to be there. So
yeah, I understand. He keeps saying he ate all the pulled pork. I don't want you to know Travis ate some of that chicken too. He took a lot of that chicken.
Oh,
But nah, man. As always, man, it's good to chop it up with you. Hope, you know what I'm saying? People can go ahead and get you that help, you know, as far as with the kids, man. It's, you know what I'm saying, important. Coaching is very important and it makes a big difference. Sports are very important and they make a big difference.
Absolutely.
But that's about it, man. We'll be back on Thursday. Talk about football some more. Get ready for the week. I got a question. I got a question for you, Ant. We're gonna talk about it Thursday. We're gonna talk about Thursday. It's a good one. It's a good one. And we might have to make it a poll question, get the audience too. But,
all right, that's a bet.
All right. But we'll be back on Thursday like that. We out.
The views and opinions expressed.
BetOnline.ag is your. This show was presented by BetOnline.ag.
Bring me my money.